Hi, I'm Rex Branson. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Woodcarvers Corner. I'm here at my studio on Grand Lake here in Oklahoma. We've been shooting this series called Woodcarvers Corner, and on this particular tape we're going to be taking you through the Bear Clan Warrior. This particular blank is designed to where this could be a bear headdress or a wolf headdress. There's plenty of room on your pre-cut blank that you'll be receiving. Give you a quick shot of the back here. It's got a little medallion and stuff on it. He could be mounted onto a base. We are getting ready to go right on in and begin our class work and begin to start carving. So y'all there at home, get your tools ready. Well, just before we get started with the carving end of this, let's take and do just a little bit of our classroom work. What we're going to do is, first of all, take a look at the blank for this Bear Clan Warrior that we're about to get started on. And I want to talk just a moment where the idea came from on this particular deal and how I developed the blank. Now, the initial idea, I have this it's a drawing book, different things, hatchets they used, bows and arrows, the clothes they wore, about their socials, their customs, religion, the whole 9 yards, with Indians of all tribes, northern, southern tribes, what have you. Well, in this particular book by T.E. Males, this is The Mystic Warriors of the Plains is the name of the book. And I was thumbing through this book. I use it quite often in my Indian research for different things because it shows so many good pictures. And I run across this particular page where it shows this, it says a grizzly bear headdress, and it's worn by bear cult members sometimes. Well, that kind of was intriguing because I've done so many with the full headdress and with feathers blowing off the side. So when it comes to Indians, I'm all the time looking for a new pose or a new garb to put on them to make an interesting subject. And I thought, well, this is somewhat interesting. So this is what got the idea going. And then I just simply looked at the next page here, and it has a guy wearing a wolf headdress. And I thought to myself, well, if I design the blank with the bear where you have more wood and more room, then if a person wanted to, you could just simply point the ears and pull the nose out, bring this area back on each side and create the wolf head dress out of it. So in a way, this particular Bear Cult Warrior blank was designed for two different blanks. One of them I had designed where he was going to have bear's claws hanging down over the front, which on the blank, when you first get the blank, you'll notice that he has a bear's claw necklace on. You can change him. His hand is in the blank to where he actually will eventually be holding a lance here with some feathers blowing off the side. So that's kind of how the whole idea started. Then I ended up running a larger version of it one time, and this is basically the same thing. It's the either bear or the wolf headdress guy. The last time I carved this, it was in the issue of Chip Chats here recently. I'll have to find the dates and show it. But I had one up at Topeka, Kansas at the show with a bust done off this big idea. But these blanks are available through me. Just ask for the bear and the wolf headdress subject and I'll know which one you're talking about. On the larger blank like this, I'm doing them in catalpa and in basswood, and those blanks are running $125 through me. Now this particular blank here, all of my 4-inch blanks that I've been designing lately, I've been having other people run the blanks. Now this particular one, Ivan Rossiter out of Wichita, Kansas is running for me, and this blank I'm selling it for $25. I think Ivan may be a little bit cheaper, but then it's mail order situation, and I'm doing this as a full-time thing, so this is where my living is. I'm teaching off these in a lot of my seminars. I have 5 different subjects now that I'm using along the way. Now, to talk just a little bit about this, what we're going to do here is we're going to begin to research. Now that we've talked about the idea, I'll move this book where I can get up here and draw just a moment. After I once settled on the subject matter, the wolf or the bear headdress particular guy, then I began to do a little bit of research about my Indian faces. And I've got a couple books. For instance, that book I just had has some Indians. This is in the Time Life book series, and it's called The Indians. And of course, it's got a lot of Indians in it. And what I've done is I've picked a couple of faces to compare here on the book. As you can see, there's several right at the beginning. And I say, okay, all of these faces have high cheekbones. Even in the sketches that I have here. These particular drawings I use all the time. They're done by a guy here in northeast of where I live here in Oklahoma. His name's Charles Banks Wilson. I've met him down at the War Eagle seminar a couple of times. But I have used his books for drawing reference and for my carving reference for years, for the facts of the dark shadowings back in the areas. And on this particular page, I want to point out the fact that he's got this arch upside down over his chin. He's got the classic high cheekbones, the heavy set in eyebrows, and of course, I shouldn't say brows, but the orbitals where the eyes are set back and in, they're sunk in. He's got the classic big wide nose. So those are some characteristics on that particular Indian. One other that I studied quite often, I'll show him to you here, is your older, thinner particular Indian. But the way that his cheekbones are sloping down, he has the same characteristics of the upside down arch over his chin area, and of course the heavy wide nose at the bottom and the eyes sunk back in. So those are characteristics along the way that you see. One of the things that we agree on are the high cheekbones. Now here's a little wider faced. This is a Comanche Indian according to him and the drawings that he's done here. But some of the characteristics apply. There's an inline and an outline falling down over the edge of the face that I use quite often. The heavy mouth barreling, it's a secondary on the heavy mouth barreling. The upside down arch over the chin. So anytime you're beginning to start in on an Indian type subject, what I want to get across here is just the fact that get yourself some reference and do a little bit of book work. Now, in this particular subject, we did notice that there is quite a line of shadowing right where his forehead quits, right here, and the animal headdress begins. So in the forehead, of course this is a rough sketch now, folks. I'm just doing it just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to look at on the face of the Indian. So as far as the bear up here on the top right now, I guess I should move this line down a little more. Have room. But you'll notice that there is a really heavy shadowing across there. So when I get ready to start in on my blank, when you get these blanks, there will be a 4-view picture with it. Now I don't see it laying here, but I'll have it in just a moment and I'll show it to you in this next segment right before we get ready to start carving. But this is where I want to bring our attention to on this particular blank, is that separation from what is the bear headdress and what is his forehead, because those are the first areas that I'm going to be concerned cutting in. As we develop into this tape, we're going to get right on into looking at Smiley here. This is my replica, plastic human skull replica. I use it quite often when I'm teaching. I've got some areas outlined here. For instance, dark going upside down over the chin. Well, we pointed out on every one of the indent faces that that is a character mark. Then we've got these in and back outlines marked on it. And that is pretty well a character line that are on most of those indents to show a secondary. It'll end up as a secondary bagging under the eye, and it'll really accentuate the high cheekbones. Now notice this skeletal mask. On an indent, we're really going to get that out there and make it wide. So as far as proportionments, whenever we're getting ready to draw an indent face, on this particular guy, I believe he was set out at a 3.5 inch head. I'll have to check that in just a moment when we start carving too. But we will point out the characteristics of 1/3 to the nose, from the chin to the nose, then 1/3 basically to this ridge, the height on the bone right up along here, and then approximately 1/3 up from there to the top or the hairline, somewhere's up in there. Now the basic shape of the indent face, let's figure out where his eyes are going to be. See where the cartilage breaks away from the bone right there? This is the exact center of the skull from top to bottom. So anytime I get ready to begin drawing a face, what I'll do is come down here. I've established where his forehead's going to be, but let's up underneath this headdress where his hair's, let's say his skull's going to be setting up and in this headdress that far, because it is a hat type headdress. So from here down to approximately here for right now, I'm going to say this is the area that his face is going to go in. Then I'm going to find a halfway mark, an approximate one for now, and say that's right here where the cartilage breaks away from the bone on the nose area. Now note that these orbitals bottom out just below that, just slightly on each side. So right in the center, marking a center line this way, I'm going to mark this in and out, just above the halfway. See here, just above this halfway mark that I pointed out here, we're going to have this, the eyes doing this in and out thing right here. So that'll usually be one of the areas I'll draw in. And then keeping in mind that these orbitals bottom out just below there, I may have that down just a little too far already. And we're going to be finding this measurement-wise on our blank in just a moment. But I'm wanting to point this out, that these are some of the characters that we're looking at. Now just below that and to the outside here is the widest point on his skeletal mask. So I'm going to draw these high cheekbones just off the edge of those eyes like this and just kind of hit them over and down. And then I'm going to dip in underneath of this area just a little bit as I'm bringing this down. These are good indent characters. This is the chin or the jawline area coming back this way. Keep in mind I mentioned this character line coming up and over this bone here where it protrudes. That's a good character line on most indents. I think I've got this right side drawn a little heavier than the left. Scoot the side of his face in. We'll blend this in with his hair in just a moment. And then of course this line going up the temple is the other line that I like to get in. Now on this particular carving, folks, since this is up and underneath of this bare headdress, we're going to capture a real dark, hard depth along the sides of this because his face is back and into this headdress. And in order, you'll hear me say throughout this tape, the depth is strength. And so as we go along, I'll shadow in areas like this on my drawing and show you where we're really going to pull back in and gain some strength. The first things on our carving that we're going to be interested in finding is of course the sides of his nose and the 1/3, which is approximately here, then the 1/3 to this brow, then the 1/3 onto the top. We will initiate in extra large area for the wings of the nostrils when we go into our wood right here. we're going to get the skeletal mask really stood out here. See this line coming around this mask? On these end ends, we're really going to pronounce this mask area, and we're going to bring this line that I talked about coming in and out and down and around on his face on these particular end ends as time goes on, which will begin to create this mouth barrel that begins at the top of the nostril and comes down, top of the nostril and comes down, and eventually we'll get into getting our lips. As you can see, it's a little difficult for me to reach back here, but this is just a sketch just to give you a little bit of an idea for some of the basic lines that we're going to get started looking on. I would like you to take your blank that you have at home and begin to review the areas are on it. But that first line, let's get it drawn in there. I'm going to get my tools ready, and just as soon as we get back together, we're going to start step one on the Bear Clan Warrior. Well, I found my 4-view picture. When you all order these blanks, you'll end up getting a 4-view picture of the original one that I've first done. And we'll look just a little bit and kind of get familiar with the photographs of the piece. Now, as I once pointed out in the blank, there is enough room right here in the wood to get a hand, and then I've added this spear with the 2 little feathers separately onto it, kind of added to the piece. Notice that this guy has a hawk claw or an eagle claw down here on the end of a beaded strand, and he has the bear's claws necklace on. His hair is long and flowing down, just falls out on the front, but it is tied on each side with a tie, and I did show just a little hint of the strands hanging down the ties. Here in this photograph, you'll notice the darkest shadowing is around his face, where his head and face is set back into the subject. Now, as we look through here, you'll see that you can see his hand, the back of his hand, so eventually we're going to have to get that in on our blank. The next photo here is, notice the depth back in. So this shows you that we have dug back in along on the forehead area quite a bit to get him back in. And of course the back view shows a medallion with some strands hanging down with some feathers hanging off from that medallion. And these are just for garb purposes. The more detail, the more stuff we can end up hanging on this carving, the better. So let's look at our blank here now. And as I started to earlier, I drew this line around here because, as I just pointed out, it is the deepest point on the carving, and it does capture the most shadow. So what I'm going to do, I should take just a moment here and go through the basic tools that I'm using. Here I have about a 3/8 V tool. I have a couple of them here because if you're like me, one of them usually is never sharp. So I got this other one here on standby. Then I have a smaller V, about a 3/16 or something V tool. Those are 2 of my V's that I will be using. The bigger one we'll be using along these heavy areas. Now I've got a collection of number 5s gathered up. Here is about a 1/2 inch number 5. Here is approximately a 3/8 little number 5. They're going to come in handy shaping the nose, shaping the face. And then I've got about a 1 inch number 5. And we'll use it to set these high cheekbones in along the way. And I have a number 7 laying over here, which is just slightly deeper than a number 5. That's approximately a 1/2 inch number 7. Use it sometimes in shaping the nose. And then I have a couple of number 9s. I have a 1/4 inch number 9 deep gouge here. Then I have a 1/2 inch number 9, and we'll be using that when we come across this area on the nose. So, and of course my carving knife, I have it laying here, And I do have one flat gouge. This is a number 3. It isn't exactly flat, but I'll use it a lot of times to plane off areas. For instance, when we square up this bear's nose a little bit more, you'll need a gouge to waste away some wood. And of course, when you get the blank, there will be a doobob up here where it's been on the duplicating machine, and that will have to come off. Now, as we well know, we've got a 2-hour term here to do this tape in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you direction and technique, and then you guys will have to catch up along as we go at home. And we won't be burning up this whole video time on, our just carving on the project. So I'll take you through this step by step. Now, let's get intimately familiar with what we're going to be doing. We have the darkest area around marked out. Now, folks, his head is laid out 3.5 inches from the bottom of his chin upwards. So go up here 3.5 inches from the bottom of his chin on your duplicated blank and make you a mark up there. Just kind of, pardon me, that just kind of show you the distance of this particular little character's head. Now, across his face, we'll end up with about 2.5 to 2 5/8 inches across the skeletal mask at the widest point. That's going to be slightly over 2.5 inches wide. Okay, notice that this particular character's head is canted off to your left. If you're facing him, it would be on this side, the left. So, keeping that in mind, let's mark a center line right down the attitude of his face, right down the center of it first. Like I said, it might be just slightly off to your left because the left side is, he's got his head turned that way just a little bit. Now we can begin to sketch widely around the skeletal mask. Since this is a duplicated blank, we pretty well know that these areas here and here are where his facial or his skeletal mask is. Now, as we're working into these blanks, folks, always work back and outwards into the carving. Don't work inwards and straight back in. You do, you'll end up finding yourself pinching the face off too narrow, then the nose off too narrow. It never fails. I've taught these things in seminars several different times. When I draw this face line in, I'm staying out bigger than it actually needs to be. I'm tapering slightly inwards along the temple area. I'm just drawing that in, saying, okay, here's the center of his face, here's the edges of his face, drawing them in out there into the hair almost. His chin is pretty well established. At this point, I'm going to guess approximately 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 on my face. Now this is a duplicated blank, so his nose is pretty well self-evident. But I am going to tell you, draw the nose, the bottom of his nose in below the hump of wood you have left. Because you can always carve more of his nose upwards later, but you can't add it back the lengthwise. So mark in his nose extra long. Now the next area that we're going to be interested in finding is this hump line up here above the eye socket area. This is the other 1/3. So at this point, if you mark the top of his head up here like I did when I told you the 3.5 long from the chin, about now you should be finding out that this is 1/3 the bottom of his nose, this is 1/3 on the top of the arch line coming across. That should leave you approximately 1/3 onto the top of there. So I am drawing this line in an arcing motion. I'm going to get Smiley right up here beside for just a moment and show you. See this height on the bridge right across here? This is where we're marking. So the eyes are going to be underneath here. Now remember just a moment ago when I told you that this point where the cartilage breaks away from the bone on the nose is approximately halfway? Well, reach right up here on your guy. If you want to measure it, measure from the chin up 1 3/4 inches, and from the top down 1 3/4 inches, which is exactly where I just got my mark at there. That'll kind of give you that. Are you with me, folks? I'll hold this up there one more time. That halfway mark that you just marked was right there. See? So we're beginning to map ourselves in. Now look here on the skull. See what happens above that? This in and out, and in and out. And the orbitals bottom out just fairly below that area. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to draw this in and out situation on both sides here, like this. Notice that I'm leaving a little bit of width in between. Okay, to the outsides I'm going to point out on the skull. Notice this point and this point here on the brow. That's where the brow begins to fold around. Now on your rough out, we're going to come over here and say that's approximately here and approximate here. Now if you have some dividers at home, they come in handy, and you might swing these from side to side, measuring from your center line from here to see if you got the same distance to the outside marked over here, and I do. Now as you're drawing the bottom of these orbitals here, folks, keep in mind that they come in just below that halfway mark just a little, and look what I've done. Now I've drawn these orbitals on my piece just like they are on the skull. Now the next line that I'm going to be concerned with is this smile line coming out from behind the nostril. Of course, the Smiley doesn't have the flesh on his nostril. So this line over here on our blank, folks, is going to start just behind the wing of the nostril here and here area, and come down and around. This is that mouth barrel or smile line. Now we may force these back and into the face as we go. Now the other line that I pointed out earlier in the tape was this protrusion upside down line. So mark that in there. These are your basic lines on the face that we're going to be interested in first thing. The next thing that we want to research out is the edge of his hair falling over and down onto his chest area. Same way on this side. His hair is going to be dropping over, down on the chest area. As we dig this outer depth, this is going to round up and eventually leave us with a tie for his hair right here, and eventually leave us with some strands hanging down the sides, which is one of these high bumps on your blank. That's what that's for. Okay? So these are going to be strands. There's going to be hair hanging down here. Come over here and mark out where the tie is going to be on his hair, approximately the same area. And you'll just see a hint of the strand on this one side because it's going to disappear up underneath. Now the hand, folks, right here, of course I don't have this finger, but the hand right here is what basically you're going to be seeing. Now notice the basic shape of the hand here. Notice this row of knuckles, and then the next row there. This chunk of meat left on your blank right here, I'm going to sketch in way bigger than I need to around this fist for right now. I'm going to get in there and shape that fist in a little later as I go. But for right now, I want to leave myself enough room to leave that there. I'm thinking that you should, on the total of your hand, have almost 2 inches, maybe 1 3/4 inches length for the thumb and everything in there. So draw big around on your blank there. Now the next thing that was in our picture, eventually here on this first photograph, maybe even the second, you can see is the fact that he does have the eagle claw necklace at the end of a beaded chain or necklace, and then the bear's claws. Now the blank's pretty self-evident. See the bear's claws here? Let's get them drawn in. Like I say, they're fairly self-evident, and we're just going to draw the claw part of this. We're not going to get interested with the fluff up there right now. And at the bottom of these claws, I do like to point them inwards as I shape them in. I'll give you the sequence on shaping those here pretty soon, a little later in the tape. Now I'm going to draw his neckline, folks. In other words, where his necklace is meeting his neck. This is a row of fuzz across here holding these bear's claws. These bear's claws are actually pushed through a mink's, it's a mink skin, and the claws are poked through it, and then it goes all around and ties behind his neck. So eventually, in between these bear's claws, we're going to show a real depth along here, and the ends of these claws will actually hang out and be on top of his shirt. Now I've got this particular piece here. I was going to get it up and show you. On this one, I have reliefed totally through the bear's claw area, see? And just left his necklace and the bear's claws hanging down, and then a portion of, say, this robe, for instance, where I'm running my hand, where his hand is. You could strengthen up that robe and go underneath and take all of this out. There are so many ideas that you could run into. The reasoning I'm showing you this bigger piece right here is the fact that I was pointing out that I've got a little tricky and went underneath a couple of places. On this guy, braided his hair. The thing I wanted to point out is the depth at the claws and the shape of those bear's claws that I'm working in. Now I'm leaving wood in between these bear's claws for an actual roll of beads. Now on this particular little subject, you won't have that kind of room. So we'll get back at our subject here. I just wanted to point that bear claw situation out to you. Okay, down here on his lower shirt area is his necklace falling down both sides underneath. As you remove these claws, you're going to have room to carve that, by the way. And then we're going to end up with a hawk's claw in this area on the necklace. Notice I drew that area in way big. I'll concentrate on that as I begin inwards on it. So I'm going to take my V-tool, folks, and the first cutting situation that I'm going to do is on an outwards flow. In other words, I'm pushing towards the outside all the while, and I'm going to start in on the heaviest area that we discussed around this whole face with my V-tool. The forehead, I'm going to get aggressive and take it back maybe more than 1/4 of an inch along here. I'm really going to get aggressive down along the side. Keep in mind that the cape does show up here on the outside. So there is skin, and all of the hair and the ties are contained within both sides. So without burning up tape time, folks, you can see what I'm doing. I'm taking my V-tool. I'm going to run this first line all the way around the outside. And when we get back together, you'll see how much that I've pushed that line and captured some shadows, and then we'll go for the second place that we're going to dig on. So go ahead and take some time and review. Okay, as you can see by the shadowing, I came in pretty good here on both sides along here with the V-tool. I've worked, there again folks, I'm stressing, work towards the outside, but don't work so thin that you're going to go out through the back of your bear skin there now. But we do want to continue to work outwardly. Now the next lines that I'm concerned with are along the side of the face right here. While we've got that V-tool, let's begin to set in these lines. Now I've already run my V-tool down this one side just before we got back on the ear here. But I'm going to run my V-tool down each side of the face. There again, I'm stressing the fact that, bearing outwards, not pinching in on the face. Now the next line, after I've got a little depth along here and here on the face, let's come down here and run this neck against the necklace. And tilt your V-tool where you're actually cutting down and in, a pretty good depth there. And not so much off from his neck, but down. Looky here, I'm just kind of coming right on up to meet the side of his face area with that particular cut. So run your V-tool down through there, and we'll begin to clean his neck at a rounding motion, down and in. Now the next line that I'm going to be concerned with is along the sides of his hair here, to border his hair. And you may have to get a hold of your projects pretty good. As you can see, I'm going to have to bump my V-tool to get her through there pretty good. And you might notice that as I'm on his chest area, I've got my V-tool tilted where I'm not cutting much, just creating a line for his hair And we'll come over and run that line up this side. And notice I'm not going in a straight line, folks. I'm throwing this little S curve thing in here that I'm doing right now. Because when you're styling that hair in there, I want you to think slow C's and S's. A slight movement about it. You know, we don't want those little straight zippy zip 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 straight lines. We want to keep this hair flowing out from underneath there. Now that we've established the lines along here now, let's go ahead and just run our V-tool just enough to take the pencil lines out each sides of these bear's claws. Just enough to kind of take your pencil lines out. Don't choke them in too narrow off the bat. Notice I'm still trying to leave them fairly wide. Remember the first rule of wood carving, folks, about this time. If you haven't learned the first rule of wood carving by now, well, you might ought to learn it, and that is you can take wood off, but you can't put it back. So, well, that's not true, actually, because we live in the days of super glue, and as far as wood carving goes, it's kind of the woodcarver's helper. You take something off, you can super glue it back, but that don't always work. So you always want to, when you're working a subtractive art such as wood carving, you always want to keep in mind that you can take that wood off, but it's tough to put it back sometimes if you've taken off too much. Okay, so I've just V-tooled through that area. The next places I'm going to V-tool are up here and begin to set in. We're just mapping. At this point, everything that we've done with this V-tool, I consider that as stages of mapping in. And see, I'm going to map in around this particular tie, and it's going to come up and tie into a knot where this brown spot that I have drawn in eventually. So we'll V-tool right in here, folks. We get a good opportunity to capture a really good hard shadow, pardon me, by digging back in there quite a ways right in this area. It's going to help. See, the shadow we're really beginning to capture now is pulling us into the piece already. So as time goes along, every time we strengthen up or begin to shadow things in, it's going to strengthen our piece. Now I'm going to come over here and echo in the ties for his hair on this other side. There'll just be a slight mapping in at this point. I also am going to go ahead and V-tool around this hand area. There again, stress the rule. Keep it big right off the bat. You know, keep it big. We can always take a little more off a little later. So I'm just running. This will begin depthing in right in this area too, folks. Right here. You might notice I'm trimming kind of the end of his hair, trimming his chest, backing in there. I'm going to V-tool around those knuckles area. V-tool around all of that. Now go ahead and make a large V-tooling also at this time around where the hawk's claw or the eagle claw necklace is going to eventually be here. Just the claw part at this moment. You might notice here there's a high spot coming right up through here and here, so eventually we'll probably end up with those beadings going up in that area. I'm just concerned in leaving some height for that area for right now. So that'll kind of give you an idea. Now down along here is this is fringe blowing out on the bottom of his shirt. Now you'll notice on your blanket you got some wood in underneath here that's going to have to come out as you go. So at this time, you can see that you're going to have to spend a little time cleaning up some of this fuzz. I will give you the sequence of cleaning out across these a little later on as this develops. What I like to do when I'm working a piece like this, folks, is work it continually all over the place. Like here, we came around the hand, we came up alongside the hair. Now let's go back up and focus on the face one more time. Let's establish the end of his nose. If you've got that 1/2 inch or 5/8 number 5, you can a lot of times take it upside down right over the end of that nose. Notice I'm staying at a downwards angle towards his mouth, approximately right on my center line. I'm going to set that, which gives you a round area, and it'll let you pick that chip right up against itself. And that'll kind of get to the end of the nose syndrome going. Then take that same number 5 and turn it around this way, and let's come right up the bridge of the nose area. I'm starting out here kind of at the point of his nose ways, not quite at the end, and I'm bringing this bridge of the nose area right up into between the eyes. I'll try to lean forward and turn sideways. Look at this indentation looking at me from the profile or from the side. See how that sets back in this angle on the nose? That is one of the areas that we're after. The very next area that we're going to depthen is right around this nostril and this smile line along the top of my mustache area. Of course, on an indent, we're going to accentuate that line. But these are two of the first lines here as we begin to get this nose set in that we're wanting to get deep enough. So look what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slough a little bit of wood to the outside and a little bit of wood to the outside. Now you folks, this might not be a bad time to go ahead and keep track of your center line here. Remember, see this line is still here as far as the center? might not hurt to dot it back in there. Even after several years of experience, you'll learn that that attitude line or that center line kept in the right spot can really help you out. Now, I've got the same number 5 that we just had. Come in here at an angle on this nose and nib it at a downwards angle like this. Come over to this side, do the same thing. We're going to nib that nose just slightly downwards at an angle. And that'll let you pick some of this excess wood with the same tool right up against itself. And you'll begin to see that we're beginning to map that nose in with the nostrils out here wide. We're beginning to bevel off the bottoms. Now the next maneuver along about this time that I like to do is take your 1/2 inch number 9, it's pretty deep little gouge, and we're going to run it right through this area. I am going to put Smiley right up somewhere here where we can take a look at him and see what we're going to do. We're going to come right through this depthing area with, of course we're going to do it on our wood piece. And see from the side, this is backing in there where I pointed out on myself is backing in. So that's going to be the whole basis behind this move right here, folks. It's just, this is under the arcing line that you once drew already. We're going to come right across the bridge of his nose. See, there's the bridge of his nose. And right to the outsides of the orbitals from each side where I had the orbitals drew. I'm going to come right through and nib that area out. Just a little bit with the round gouge. And it just needs to be just to the outsides of this area on your rough out. Just enough to where we can wax a little of that out. And I'm going to grab my 1-inch number 5 tool. Now I want you to notice how this portion of the skeletal mask falls out of that corner of that eye. And it does fall down and around there. See that? And this area, as it juts over this bone right here, will begin to kind of fall downwards and out of that eye setup area. So what I'm going to do is come right here with this number 5 upside down and roll this portion or this transition on the face down and back to kind of capture a niche in the corner of the eye area. That's really pulling, see, notice how it's pulling this skeletal mask down a little more. Okay, let's roll over to the other side and do the same situation. We've got that skeletal mask falling out of there. Now let's look at a character line on this skull that can be brought in at about the same time. There is a light or a lulling valley area that falls in right here, slightly over and back out. Now on the browing right in this area here and here, I usually will end up showing a tuft of skin right in this area on the brow, which will really strengthen it up. But this line that I'm showing you comes in and it rolls down past the high cheekbone area and right on over and around the face. So I'm going to come up here and draw this line, and this is just a real slight low when we get ready to put it in. Comes back out, down over the face, and kind of back and around. A lot of times I have started it right here on the chin and went underneath the chin and up and around and out. We'll do the same thing here. Into the corner of the eye, back out, down and around, and right back up and under the chin, so to speak. Now folks, I've got that 1/4 inch number 9, and as this line is coming into the corner of the eye area, you can begin to pull that line in with a smaller 1/4 inch number 9 like I have here. Set that line in there. Nib just a little bit of it coming over on the brow. Now, we don't want to get too pronounced on this brow thing, but I'm going to show you where this is going to begin to make sense for us in just a little bit by having that line there. I'm coming over and into the corner of the eye. Now you'll probably notice on your projects about this time at home that it sure wouldn't hurt to pull a little more wood out of this corner or the center of his nose area and thin that down a little. So we're going to taper that in. Keep in mind there's a high spot coming across here where that bone is underneath the nose, the cartilage area. But we're continually strengthening the corners of the eyes. Now you see this protrusion that we have left right here on this side? See this point of the skull where this dark is? That's where this is at. It's pointing that out. Same way on this side. You'll end up with these two little protrusions, which are the skull bones pushing out from side to side on that. Now you'll have these harsh ridges on the eyes, the orbitals on the top. Let's just soften them over and out in the corners here, just slightly. This harsh edge here, we're just going to soften it over and right on off the side of the face a little bit. Now you might recall this line that I've got drawn on around. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch number 9, a little bigger tool, and bring this line on, right on off the edge of the face on both sides here. I know my hand's going to be in the way for just a moment, but you'll just have to bear with me and see what I'm doing as I go along here. It's kind of hard to make that cut without keeping my hand out of your way. But I'm bringing that indentation around. I'm going to come over on this side of the face and do the same thing. I'm bringing this indentation around on the face. Now along about this time we'll bring you down here where you can run this U-gouge along underneath this neck. Depthing up that neck just a little bit, scraping some of that off from his Adam's apple and setting it right on up to the hair here. Now in this area, while you're messing with it, let's echo this Adam's apple. You know that everything falls into a pit right in this center area down here where all of this goes in between the clavicles, the two shoulder or the collarbones. So there will actually be a pit here. So if we take this gouge that I've got and echo over top of that Adam's apple, or around it I should say, on each side, we'll make a slight echoing effect. You'll have to take a little time in there working that echoing. I have this theory about this neck area and these sternal-mastoid muscles, and some of this is a lot of times on the neck, if you can't tell the truth, just baffle them with a little bit of that BS stuff. In other words, let's show them a little bit of the protrusion, and in a little bit we'll come on in and show them two nice protrusions for the two sternal-mastoid muscles coming down. That'll make it artistically acceptable enough to say, well, he knows a little bit about his anatomy. If we're not going to do this particular piece for a show or something, we're just wanting a good sellable piece out of it. Now, long about this time, we can begin to add some depths. We've got the upper 1/3, which is strength. His eyes started. We got his nose started in. Let's go down and look at this 1/3, this bottom 1/3 of his face. Now folks, when I draw that mouth in there, I'll lean forward into the camera and show you the bottom portion of this face right here is 1/3 of the face supposedly, but the mouth is longer on the bottom side than it is on the top. It's about halfway, and then I'll make my cut just above the halfway mark. So as I'm getting ready to draw it in here, I'm going to mark my halfway point and then mark my mouth to it. Now folks, the mouth is going to be just longer than the eyes are straight down. In other words, I've marked the center of my eyes. The mouth will come across and be just a little longer than if it was straight down from the eyes. So a lot of times when I'm drawing this mouth in here, I'll just bring the thing right on over and off that mark. Now I'm going to get this picture up here just a moment, and we'll talk just a little bit about this mouth area. We'll have what they call a septum dimple set up right here under the nose area, which is just nothing more than merely a little trough. I've heard some comical artists say that's the snot trough underneath there. We'll make a dip there, And then I'm going to get over here and draw you this lip line that we're going to be looking for. And it's going to come up out of the center and come over and off like this. Remember when you used to draw them birds when you were in high school, or in grade school, I mean, that were just kind of stick birds flying in the distance? Well, that's kind of what you got there for the top line of the lip. Now, of course, here's the center line where the mouth actually parts. Now, the lower lip line that we're looking to find will be shaped a lot like this right here. So this area is going to be a protrusion called a septum on the lip. We'll have a little bit of that, and then right above it we want that snot trough, or that groove in there. So right here is where we're going to come in with a 1/4 inch number 9 will work real well for you on that septum dimple on this particular size of face. Go ahead and get that put in there fairly decent before we get ready to put the lips in. I like that in there first. It'll kind of guide you and help you get your lips set in. Now, as far as the lips goes, let's take our V-tool at this time and just merely come right through what we've got marked here. Here again, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because I know my hands are fixing to be right in the way of where I'm trying to show you. But this particular cut, I'm going to bring it right on over and around and kind of off. And then I'm going to tip my V-tool down as to take a little bit of this lower lip down some. Just a little, not much. Notice how I'm tipping my V-tool downhill more, right? Okay, on this other side there again, like I say, I know my hand's going to be right in your way, folks, of seeing where I'm going, but I'm just going to tip this other side right on down and around here. And then right underneath this edge, I'm going to begin to bring the lower lip kind of under the upper lip. So along about that time, you're going to have something that looks about like this. Now, what we're wanting to do along about now is to go up and add our nostril in. Earlier, you might have heard me say I had this 1/2 inch number 7. What I can do if I've got my nose came along so far this way, I'll lean into the camera and show you there is a slight curve in the bottom of the nostril right in here. And to gain that natural curve on that nostril like that on the nose, a lot of times I'll take that tool right here from the side and just simply skate it like this. This is number 7 I've got here now. I'm going to do the same thing over here, trying to keep them even now. Keep in mind that this is on the same nose as the other mark you just made. So make those cuts in there. Then you can take your knife, come in here from the front and make a stop cut right down each side of that septum, and then reach in here and pull this booger out of his nose on each side. Okay. You may have to make this stop cut one more time right in this area with your knife, where you just roll that tool up and underneath there a little to gain some good depth. So we're going to depthen that area out. I'm going to go ahead and re-roll this one at an upwards angle just a little bit. I'm going to spend just a little time feathering out all of these. See these harsh ridges that I've got on the face where I've set these lines in now? I'm going to spend a little time feathering off any harsh ridges. Here's some harsh ridges I'm talking about left here. We're going to begin to feather those off, and I'm going to begin to work the mounds real nicely with my knife to get ready to set. In other words, we're just cleaning everything up. See this harsh edge up here on his brow now? While we're talking about that brow, let's go ahead and get this in and out thing to really show a heavy brow right in here. A lot of times I call that an attitude area, because anytime you go messing with that particular portion of the face, you're going to change his attitude. This gives a stern, proud look to these Indians. I like it on the Western character figures that I do. I'll pull in a little. I've got a number 5 upside down, and I'm just barely scoring a line that I'm picking up against that line, and I'm toning down on that facial area. Now, just before we stop and get all this cleaned up, I want to make one more cut for you, and it's going to be on the outside of his hair out here and up and underneath this bare hat, and then down this side on the outside of his hair. It's going to be what I call a running stop cut. And I am going to tip this down and get it to where I'm going to take my knife right here up and underneath that headdress, and I'm going to make that cut. It's a pretty good cut. You want to brace your arm good. You don't want to slide off and hurt nobody. See, I'm bringing it right on and down around the side here, and I'll just continue it right on down along the side of his hair. Okay, while I'm working against that, I'll show you what I'm going to do. Is I'm just going to pull a little shadowing. In other words, I'm running another cut almost parallel to it, except I'm meeting them for depth down in there. I just made both cuts on this one particular chip, and when I pop it out, I'll try to get this up there where you can see now. Notice the depth that I'm gaining along here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to follow this line just like that. I'm going to make a real nice deep cut on the outside of his hair, and that's really going to set this face back in. Let's spend a little time cleaning up, softening off the edges. Next time we get together, we'll go on to get the eye and the rest of the mouth put in there.
You guys are probably wondering what's going on this tape. I just spent all day long staining this 6-foot cigar store Indian that I'm getting ready to take up to Aspen, and I was so proud of the way he was looking that I just figured that you guys might be interested in looking him over. He will have this shield over this hand over here. I got it where it'll screw on just right, and then up through this hand is the spear with a couple of feathers blowing off from it. But and then of course about 3 or 4 or 5 coats of deft on him. But he's beginning to look pretty sharp. I just thought maybe you guys might want to check him out. We like to have a face that good on what we're doing. Well, we'll get back to the carving after that little excitement with the big Indian. I had just been trying to get that ready to go up to Aspen and working real hard on it, so thought maybe you guys might enjoy seeing it. Now what we're going to get back to on our piece is I had spent a little time cleaning up in these deeper areas. I run my knife in some stop cuts. I do want to echo around the face one more time before we get started in on this eyes. Now if you can pull in and realize that there's no shadowing right around the immediate face. See in these areas right over here. So what I'm going to do, and not a lot of people teach this, is I'm going to capture a little shadowing right along the edge of the hair. I'm running my knife along the edge of the hair real gently here, and I'm going to twist it where it's cutting up and underneath the hair, coming off onto the neck area. Now look here what I'm going to do. After I made that stop cut, I'm going to come this way and pull out just a little chip out of here. See that shadow I caught? Okay, I'm pulling this chip out here. Now I am going to, while I'm using my knife, I'm going to go ahead and make some little entry cuts, 3-way stop cut situations to show the top of this hair wrap right here. And I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom of it, is make a little 3-way stop cut with my knife. Now see folks, once I've done this stop cut that I showed you the first and kind of curled it up and back this way underneath the hair, now as I'm cleaning up the neck, I'm just going to kind of dip my knife right to it in a circular motion like this. And that'll let me pull that chip out of along there. Now the whole idea of that, might have to spend a little time in there cleaning some of those chips up. It sure make it look more professional. The more time you spend cleaning those chips up, the better. Try not to back up and make a separate cut and then back up and make a separate cut. You'll end up with a bunch of hamburger doing that. So you'll just have to take your time and clean some of these chips up that you're making. Right in this area, I'm really getting in there after some deep shadowing. I've got the area pretty well cleaned up. I'll turn it just a little here where you can see. See this nice shadowing beginning to happen along the edge of the face, and I've really caught a hard shadow in the neck area. So what I'm going to do is come over here on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing, make a reliefing. You know, don't get too heavy with that cut. And as you're coming off around the neck area here, keep moving around on you, but it makes it a little easier on me. Okay, that's one of the cuts. I'll tip it back this way. Now I'm going to dip in the temple area because, as we well know from looking at Smiley, the temple areas are going to dip in just a little. And we're wanting to capture that shadow. There again, like I say, spend a little time in there. Clean them chips up. Capture a nice shadow at the temple area. And then just underneath that high cheekbone, we're going to dip it in just a little. Pull that chip out, and you'll notice that that shadow is beginning to build back in there. I have a chip that's not wanting to let go like it should. Those are supposed to just pop right out of there for the teacher, you know. Okay, and I'm working right down around the edge of the neck. I'm leaning that away to see. I hope I'm not getting my head in the way of where you guys can see what I'm doing here. There we go. As I mentioned earlier, if you all have never tried videotaping and keeping your hands out of the way while you're carving where somebody can picture what you're doing, it's kind of a tough task to do. You find yourself carving in some pretty uncomfortable positions, trying to stay out of the way of the camera where we can accommodate you guys. Okay, now we've captured that nice depth and shadow along the edge of his face, man. See how that's beginning to pull you in on the piece? Now here's the next place, folks. Right along where the separation from his neck and this bear's claws necklace, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run this stop cut at a downwards angle. I realize my hand's probably in the way here, but you'll just have to bear with me. You can see what I'm doing. I'm making that cut going down at a downwards angle. It's going to make this next relief cut easier to pick up to. And we're just wanting to capture a good shadow down in there. So I'm going to reach over here with my knife at just a little bit of an angle. Pull this chip out. There again, you know, them chips are supposed to just pop right out there. They're not supposed to give me any trouble like that. Okay. Here I am pulling just a little out. Notice that shadow that's really beginning to happen in there. I'll reach over on this side at an angle, back in behind there. Now a lot of times if this area is rough to get into and you can't get in there with your knife like I just did, folks, this is a pretty standard gouge that comes in a lot of your little handsets. It's got a little fishtail to it and a little bit of a curve. And a lot of times when I'm cleaning up this neck area back up in here, I can take the edge of this tool like this and begin to work this neck back and around. Now, earlier I had said something about we're going to fake it on this sternomastoid muscle on the neck. So we're going to have what we'll end up with here is
echoing the Adam's apple like we talked about once before. We're going to fall into a nice pit right down in here in the center where I just marked that line. And then we're going to end up between these two lines I just drew in here is going to be a high spot. That's that sternomastoid muscle coming up. And now, as I mentioned earlier on the tape too, all we're doing is just kind of making some transitions of form in here and baffling the onlooker with a little BS to make them think that you know something about your anatomy. If you're doing this for a realistic human bust competition, I suggest that you would get your anatomy book and search the area. I'm just giving you some good technique that looks good. This is a sellable product. We've got the transitions in here. Most viewers look at that and says, well, he pretty well knows his muscle structure. That looks kind of like a neck that he's got on here. So I'm working the Adam's apple over just a little, and I'm going to echo it just a little more and get a little more of a pit down here at the bottom side. So at this point we've worked depth, folks, all the way around the facial area. See that depth that we've set that whole facial area? Let's take a look at it here. Notice this shadow we're capturing. Notice the secondary shadow around here and into the neck. Man, we're beginning to capture this piece. Now, let's get in and talk about this eye, about the next little go around here. We'll just keep moving right on along. Now, folks, with this eye, I have got my 1/4 inch number 9 gouge. And once we've got our mounds made in there, these eyes happen fairly easily from there. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to make an arching motion, and I'll go ahead with it here if you can get down where you can see what I'm doing. Anyway, I'll try to keep my hands out of the way. But I'm just going to make an arching motion right over and downward, kind of off the side with that, and then same way over and down coming into the nose. See that arch I left? That's going to end up being the top eyelid. Then we're going to nib the bottom one just a little coming back this way. That's with a round gouge now, folks. And I'm going to get this piece of paper out here and do a little drawing for you about the shape of the eye that we're looking for. Now, the shape that we are looking for comes up out of that tear duct in the corner, levels off at the top for a little ways, kind of rounds, and then falls over and back downward like this. This is the top. The bottom. Now on these ends, we're going to have to keep this bottom kind of straight across here and not get it opened up too much, folks, because what happens on this end is you get this area opened up too wide, they begin to look excited and all. Eventually we'll end up with this tucking right here in the corner, like this bottom lid is tucking in and under. So when we make this top cut with the V-tool coming over and off, we won't care if it goes on over on the corner, because this will end up in the crow's footing in the corners. And we will bring this tear ducking into the corner. Let's look up here where we've been drawing. What we're looking to do is have approximately 4.5 to 5 eyes wide across our piece. The anatomy books call for 5 eyes wide. I can tell you from experience, artistically, you're going to be better with 4.5 eyes. Make your eyes a little bigger than what you think they need to be. Now see, we've got these mounds that I'm drawing on right here. We've already got these cut into the piece. So this line that I just arched in with that 1/4 inch number 9, we've created this top eyelid. And then when I said nib the bottom, I was just nibbing coming back across this area here. Same way here. So this is the setup we're looking for. You'll want 1 eyeball length in between these other eyeball lengths. I'm guessing at 2.5 inches across the face. I presume that's what I said earlier. I don't have my tape measure laying here right at the moment, but I'm almost sure of that. I think our orbitals are going to want to end up being about 7/8 of an inch right here, 7/8 of an inch across right here. So gauging from the center, when we get ready to cut our eyes in, we're going to about, in other words, you won't cut your eye right up against the edge of your nose, folks. You're going to start outwards from the corner of the nose just a little bit. Now I'm going to come over onto the other side and go ahead with this 1/4 inch number 9. Look here what I'm going to do. Just in a raking, arcing motion. I realize my fingers were in the way there. I'm going to nib the bottom of this. And then back downwards on this side. The only purpose for those cuts that I just done there was just to set up that top eyelid. Now at this point we can take our smallest V. I've got this little 3/16 V. And I'm going to, remember that line I just drew you on the paper? That's the shape that we're looking for right here. So I'm going to echo this in with a V. Now you're better off to V this in a little closed. In other words, don't get that eye opened up too wide. That's a common mistake that I see in my seminars. People end up with that eye way too wide in there. I V'd it in narrow because I can always come back and V some more off the top or the bottom and open it on up. But man, if you open it up too big right off the bat, sometimes it's hard to straighten out. See, and I came right on off the edge of the face with that side. So at this point, I've got them kind of V-tooled in. I notice the outside of this one's really bearing downwards. So about that time's when it might not hurt to do a little work to back and forth. You'll hear me say jockey back and forth quite often. And this is one of the times when you might have to spend a little time jockeying back and forth. I am going to tip this back. At this point, we're going to take our knives and put it right into that tear duct corner of that eye. Now, I'll try to turn this where we can see what I'm doing just a little better here. I'm just going to make this stop cut right in the corner here. I can see that my hand's right in the way. Anywhere I try to go, let's get this where y'all can see anyway. This corner and then the other way, that's a two-way stop cut, and I'm going to slide right in here and pick that corner out. Okay, then I'm going to reach over to the other side here. Don't angle your knife up or down or anything else. Just kind of crowd it in right towards the eyeball itself. Pop that corner out. Now I'm going to reach over here and do the same thing. It's good to double check that you've got them straight across the face from each other before you decide to cut them. That's a common mistake you see, that on a lot of them one eye will be lower than the other one. And I realize my hands are in the way, but I'm popping the corners out of each one of the eyes here, folks. Okay. Once we get the corners popped out, we are just simply going to take our knife and drag right across and connect the two lines. And the more time that you can spend right in here rounding this eye up. Now the same way on the top, we'll make a dragging stop cut across the top. But now when you take a little wood right here off the top of these eyes, you don't have to take as much, because remember earlier when I said that the eye socket actually falls down and back into the head at the bottom side? So you can take a little more off the bottom side and not quite so much off the top. I'm creating a shadow for myself as far as my hands in the light too, so I hope y'all can see. Okay, here's one of the eyes. I'll turn it around here straight on. Got it set back in. Now at this point, notice how thick the lid looks. See here? Okay, so what we're going to do, I'll go over here in a minute, and I guess I just will do it right now and have it over with. See, I'm connecting them two lines. I
I am trying to keep my hand out of the way here where you guys can see, and in the meantime I'm creating problems, I guess. Okay, I'm just going to connect these two lines across the top. Then I can reach right in here and spend some time rounding this eyeball down. You'll have to spend a little bit of time up here on the top trimming that off too. Now you'll have to, pardon me, you'll have to make these match from side to side. And so you're going to spend a little time in there. Just because I might have done that on this tape in just a few minutes, I always stress that at my seminars. Just because it took me a few minutes to sit there and show you to do it, don't think that you're just going to jump in and cut that eye in that quick. I've done several of them and I've had plenty of practice. Now look how thick that bottom lid is on both sides. I'm going to take this V tool and tip it up on edge where I'm using the edge of the V and bring this wood down to meet the contour of the eye a little nicer. Okay, same way on this one over here. See, I'm tipping that V down and I'm kind of bringing that wood down to meet the contour of the eye, bringing it up into the corner, cleaning up a few little places. A lot of times, folks, I'll take that V tool and set it right in the corner of that eye and nib that tear duct just a little on both sides. Nib that tear duct a little. And along about that time, if you feel like you need a secondary lid line, take that small V tool and just scrape you the secondary lid here on each side. Okay, at this point, if your top lids look a little thick, take your V tool and pull them down a little closer to the contour of the eye. That's what I'm doing, both sides. Now, for instance, this one here, I'm just going to bring these right on off the top of the eyelid and over and out and into a crow's foot. So if my hand's in the way, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm hooking these up this direction. I'll get over here and hook these up in this direction. Okay, the next place we could bring some strength into our carving along about this point is to round the lip up. And remember that little round gouge that I had here? I don't even know the number on it. It just comes in one of them handsets. But to round these lips up, look here, I can take the edge of that fishtail upside down and just barely run a little roundness on that lip. Same way here, I'm going to tip it and go the other way. Just barely run a little roundness on that lip. Okay, to capture some depth in the middle of that lip, just simply take your knife. Remember that when I showed you guys how to draw them birds back when you did in grade school thing? Well, that's kind of the shape that we're wanting this shadow in the center to take that effect. And I'm just barely dragging a little line out. So if you all don't pick up anything else from this video, I'm hoping that you're seeing the shadows, that I'm really pulling in hard around these areas, because that seems to be my style, and as I teach the seminars, that's usually what I really focus on. To get that good realistic look, you have to have the depth, which is going to give us that striking look along the way. Now I'm working this bottom lip. Notice how puffy it looks. I'm going to work it off just a little bit and try to work it into a little more of a proud look instead of a puffy look here. Okay, along about this time, folks, I'm going to give you some quick procedures on a few other things, and you can begin to work on yours at home. Is, for instance, the hair. At this point, I'm going to take a 1/4 inch number 9 and begin to throw some bases in. If you don't know what I mean by basing it in,
is some good deep runners for the hair in 4 or 5 places, coming up and in with the 1/4 inch number 9 round gouge here. We're talking. Okay, remember earlier, now that's some of the things we'll base in some hair, even reach right in here and base in a little bit with a round gouge and get it to moving. Don't give us those old straight lines when you're doing hair. Keep them slow C's, slow S's. Keep it moving, coming down. The next thing that we can do is, remember this tie over here? Let's add a real heavy shadow right down along the edge of this tie from the hair. Now, by pulling in this heavy shadow here again, you can see I'm separating, I'm showing definite separation between what is the tie. I'll get that piece out of there. See this definite separation now between what is the tie and what is his hair. I'll do the same thing on this side. I'll show a distinct separation down. Now you won't have much of the edge of this tie showing here. You're just barely going to have a little of the edge of it. But we will show a nice definite separation there. Now you're probably wondering about these claws. I have taken this 1/2 inch number 9 gouge, round gouge, and upside down. See, I'm using the U side of it downwards, or upside down, and I'm beginning to shape the tops of these bear's claws coming over and in. Now since there's fuzz above them too, I'm going to shape these going over and into that fuzz, see? And you can use that gouge right back against itself to clean off on the tops of it, just like that. The reason I do this is it ends up shaping you 4 really nice rounded bear's claws coming down. Now as far as the sides of them, folks, take you a number 5. I've got a 1 inch number 5 here. Take something with a slight bit of curve. It don't have to be a number 5. You could use a number 3. But along the side of this, I'm using the curve going towards the center on the outside of this particular one, and I'm going to work right against itself. Now on the inside, I'm going to use it going the exact same way. See, that way this curves my bear's claw the same direction. So I'll use that and I'll pick up along the side of it. Okay, you heard me saying earlier in the tape that there's a line along here that is the rest of this fuzz coming over, and then we're going to have a deep area to go underneath the claws here. I'll give you the sequence of how I normally go about that. Is I'll take a small gouge that I can get in between here. Alright, I'm going at a downwards angle. I'll try to move my hand where you can see. I've got this gouge, flat gouge, and I'm going to go down and in right there. By making that stop cut like I just did, that'll let me pick this particular wood up underneath here. Which, as you can see, what's beginning to happen is I'm gaining a lot of height on the side of this claw. See here where I'm at? So what I can do is just begin to nib in and underneath the edge of the claw as I clean up the background around it some. Okay, that's the sequence. What you're going to end up doing, and I'll just do a couple crossed here quick. Now this is a little flatter gouge. It's a number 3 instead of your number 5, but you can use it right along the side of one of your bear's claws right here. Pick up against it, pull the excess off, the same way on this side. Set those bear's claws in, the depth of them. Now the bottoms of them are going to be down and onto his shirt quite a bit more than you think. See, I run it on that side, facing the same way, and run it up the side of that, so you got some excess wood. And then just take your other flat gouge. I realize I'm probably right in the way again. And that's when I'm going to do that downward maneuver right there again. Just bouncing it in with the palm of my hand. and that'll let me work right some of this wood right out of there. So you're beginning to see about this time that your bear's claws are beginning to stand out on the bottom side, which if you begin to nib in and under them like this and this from both sides and cleaning out, you'll eventually work a hole underneath all of the claws. Now we're hurting for time on our tape to keep this under a 2-hour tape, so I'll give you the segment on your hair. You can go ahead and get it set in. You can bring these claws in and begin to bring this shirt background down and under the claws, all where I'm drawing in here. This can be cleaned up. Leave us some room right here where our eagle claw is going to go. And as we're blocking in the hand, we're going to take larger flat gouge. I got this 1-inch number 3. Now notice the basic planes of the hand. This is falling back towards the wrist. All you have to do is just put your own hand up there, folks, and realize that this portion of the hand that goes around and behind that spear falls over, and you'll have a couple of planes. And then you got this basic plane. I know my hand's a poor example, but this basic plane and this basic plane. Well, a lot of times what I'll end up doing on this hand is just realizing this much, that the knuckle, this knuckle, is usually halfway between the wrist and the first knuckle here. So, for instance, if his wrist is just in behind the road right here, and this first row of knuckles, I'm guessing, keep in mind that row of knuckles gives a little bit of an arcing motion. See this arcing motion I'm talking about? So I'll just draw in my first row of knuckles like that and say that is this row. So these fingers will fall on around. See in a clinch how they fall on back and then back around again. And then the top of the hand here, this portion of the hand here, the top of the hand, and this is angling up on behind where the thumb is, and then of course the way the thumb goes around and back. You can begin to get that drawn in. The main sequence being the hump on the thumb here is halfway between the wrist and here. So I'm just going to mark kind of a halfway area here for the height of my thumb to be on. Now I can take this tool upside down. I got this number 3. If you can pull in, see what I'm doing. I'm going to set this basic plane to the hand on around because he's got his fingers around the spear. Keep that in mind. And I'm wanting to set that good against his shirt where I'll be able to gain some depth here in a little bit. So I'm pull some of that off. Okay, this is the line on the top of the hand going towards the thumb. And then I'm nibbing it just a little right in this area here. Okay, I'm going to clean up this plane on the back of the hand, the duplicator marks off, coming back towards the wrist. Keeping in mind that that center knuckle is the highest one out, the one on your middle finger. And then notice that this knuckle here drops back. See, this one's further out a little, then this one drops back, and these two are back. So I'm going to draw me a row of 4 knuckles in almost that same arcing motion, see there? And when I get ready to here in a little bit, that's where I'll V-tool on this sides over here for the fingers to go on around and behind that shield. Now right now, I'm wanting to get the hump on the top of this thumb. I've got my number 5, and upside down I just went over this hump, going over and in right here. See there? Okay, on this particular portion of the thumb, I'm going to take that number 5 and nib it going over and in that way. And then that last portion, boy, look at that, that number 5, it almost fit that last portion as far as that dip. So we'll pull it over and in and kind of behind, because keep in mind, if you've got his hand like this around the spear, that thumb's going to, you might want to put your hand around something and realize how that situation happens. Anyway, this will begin to get your hand set in, and you're going to have to take a tool and work the background down around it. So I'm not going to do this on the air, but I'm going to clean this whole shirt area around the bottom of the hair. Now, since we figured out we're a little short on tape time, I'm going to give you some fast segments here. Most of the instructional on this tape is for the facial area anyway, and we've pretty well covered the face. You guys can see I've got this area cleaned down quite a bit. I've even got my beads drew in. I've came in with a 1/4 inch number 9 tool here, and by using it upside down to set the top of the beads like this, and then to use the tool back the other way to make the bottom of the beads, this tool you can clean right up against itself. See these ones over here where I'm making these perfectly round beads by cleaning up against itself? So you'll have to get your beads set in. Okay, the next, this is what the bear claw next is going to have a little, the eagle claw is going to have a little wrap at the top, and then of course you'll have your eagle claw situation. You'll probably have to do a little research on that, folks. The next thing we're going to touch on is just up here. I've taken off quite a bit of room on the top. Notice the picture. There's some depth in on his ears. Notice how close that the eyes are in against the nose. Notice the squareness on the bear's muzzle. So there's some areas there that you can begin to work in. I've already done some setting in on this bear to kind of show you, but now I do plan on doing a little more on the eyes and bringing some depth in there. Now as far as the fur pattern on the bear, I have taken my 1/4 inch number 9 and I begin to throw in a series of teardropping motions. See how this series of teardrops that I'm beginning? I'll do this all over this whole bear. Now up on the face I'll kind of filter them out just a little bit. Then I'll come back in between with a V-tool and throw in some quick enhancements, maybe a few strands of hair here and there on top of these, and that'll give you this bear fur type pattern. The other thing that'll have to be brought along is I'm fixing the V-tool around my medallion here on the back. There's room for 2 feathers. You can either do 1 or 2 hanging off right here, and then I'm going to V-tool, see this strand coming down, and I'll relieve some wood out from underneath there. So due to the fact that we're short on tape time, the next time we come in, I will probably be ready to sand this project. You can go ahead and get the nostrils put in on your nose. And as far as finishing up here on the eyes, folks, I've just taken this 1/4 inch number 9 gouge, and I've simply came right in here and set it in the eye and skated it on both eyes. And then I've taken my knife and nibbed in just a little pupil in there. Now I had talked about next time we met that I was going to be sanding on this piece. But due to the shortage of film time that we have left, I had went ahead and sanded the piece. I'd carved this little spear separately on the guy and got it ready. Now my preparation is after I sanded my guy, I used some of this darker Duro finish, or you can use the dark satin finishing wax. This is just a series of waxes that I have used. I've used the dark on the darker places. I've mixed with the neutral to get a in-between color. And then on the final finishing, I will be using this min wax to cover all of it. So you may have to play with your own finish. The instructional portion of this was more on the carving part and maybe not so much on the finish. But this is a total wax finish, and I've used different shades of it. Now this kind of give you a view of the guy from the side. And of course he's got the medallions and the feathers here on the back. Now this little carving with a round routed base with a nice brass name tag could look very sharp. It could be a very well presented piece. And so I hope you've all learned something through this tape. I've enjoyed going through this project with you. I want to thank you for taking the time to view this tape. And
This is Rex Branson coming to you from my studio here on beautiful Grand Lake. And until we carve next.